The Grand Hotel was glowing that evening. Lights shimmered on polished marble floors, and the scent of fresh flowers filled the air. Wealthy people dressed in expensive suits and elegant gowns moved through the lobby, chatting and laughing. A live orchestra played soft music near the entrance, and waiters passed around glasses of champagne. Everything was perfect, expensive, and carefully arranged. Among all this, a young woman walked quietly toward the corner where an old piano stood. Her clothes were worn and patched, and her shoes had holes. She looked out of place among the glitter and shine. But she moved with calm determination. The young woman's name did not matter to the crowd. To them, she was just another street person who had wandered inside. Her eyes held something different, though. They were steady, focused, and full of quiet strength. She stepped up to the piano and gently placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, she paused and looked around. The people nearby whispered to each other, pointing and laughing. Some shook their heads as if to say, "Who let her in here?" A few even took out their phones to record, expecting a funny spectacle. At that moment, the billionaire entered the lobby. He was famous not only for his wealth but for his sharp mind and sharp tongue. People often said he could read someone in a second and make them feel small without trying. He noticed the young woman at the piano and stopped in his tracks. A small smirk formed on his face. He leaned toward one of his assistants and whispered something that made the assistant laugh quietly. The words were meant for nobody else but carried a sting. The billionaire walked closer, his eyes fixed on the young woman, and called out, "Do you really think you belong here?" His tone was playful, but there was a clear edge. The guests nearby turned to watch, sensing a drama about to unfold. The young woman looked up. She could feel the weight of every gaze, every judgment. She did not speak. She simply nodded and began to play. The first notes were soft and uncertain, almost timid. They did not fill the room at first. The guests chuckled quietly, expecting her to make a mistake, expecting the music to be clumsy and weak. Even the billionaire leaned back slightly, ready to enjoy the spectacle of her failure. But something shifted. As her fingers moved across the keys, the sound changed. It became more confident, more alive. The melody was delicate, but had depth. Each note carried a quiet emotion that seemed to reach into the hearts of the listeners. The people who had been whispering began to stop. The laughter faded. The soft music of the orchestra was drowned out by her playing. It was no longer just sound. It was a story. Her hands moved like they were telling every hardship she had faced, every loss, every lonely night. She played with skill and feeling that could not be taught. The billionaire's smirk disappeared. He straightened up, his arms crossed, and watched. He had expected to mock, to belittle, to enjoy someone else's embarrassment. Instead, he was caught off guard. He could feel something in the music that made him uncomfortable, something he had not felt in years. The notes reached into parts of his mind that he usually ignored, memories of his own struggles, moments when he had felt small and powerless. Guests moved closer, unable to look away. Some had tears in their eyes. An older woman clutched her pearls and whispered, "She is incredible." Young man stood frozen, his phone forgotten in his hand. The room, which had been full of chatter and movement, had become silent. Only the piano's music filled the space, weaving a story that everyone could feel but no one could put into words. The young woman played as if she had been waiting her whole life for this moment. She poured everything she had into the music. Her past, her struggles, her dreams, they all spoke through her fingers. And the more she played, the more the room changed. The laughter, the whispers, the judgments, they all faded into something new. People forgot her clothes, her shoes, even her presence in a world that had ignored her for so long. They only heard the music. The billionaire took a step forward. He could not move away. He wanted to, but he was held in place by curiosity and a strange sense of shame. He realized he had underestimated her. He had expected to see weakness, to see fear, to see failure. Instead, he saw strength, talent, and a quiet confidence that could not be broken. The way she played told him something he had long forgotten, that money and power could never replace skill, courage, or heart. Minutes passed like hours. The melody built slowly, rising and falling. touching on sadness and hope. Each note seemed to speak directly to the people in the room. Some felt memories they had tried to forget. Some felt hope they had long abandoned. And the billionaire felt something he could not name, a stirring in his chest that made him uneasy. He looked around and saw that everyone else was captivated in the same way, unable to look away. When the last note rang out, the room stayed silent. The young woman's fingers lingered on the keys, as if afraid to let go of the moment. Slowly, people began to clap. First one, then another, and soon the entire lobby erupted in applause. Guests who had been mocking her moments ago now stood amazed. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Some whispered to each other, saying, "I can't believe it. She is amazing." The billionaire remained still. He did not clap immediately. He watched her, studying her face, trying to understand how someone so quiet, so unnoticed, could have such an effect. The applause continued around him, but he felt distant, caught in his own thoughts. He realized that for the first time in a long time, he had been completely unprepared. The music had touched something inside him that wealth and power had never reached. It made him question everything he thought he knew about people, about talent, about judgment. Finally, he stepped closer. He did not smile. He did not speak. He only watched as she slowly rose from the piano bench. The young woman did not seek attention. She did not bow dramatically. She simply stood, taking in the moment with quiet grace. Her eyes met his for a brief second, and in that glance, something unspoken passed between them. It was recognition, respect, and perhaps a silent challenge to see beyond appearances, to listen beyond words. The young woman gathered her small bag and walked toward the exit. The guests followed with their eyes, still murmuring about what they had witnessed. The billionaire remained near the piano, frozen, replaying the music in his mind. He knew that this moment would stay with him forever. A single encounter, a few minutes at an old piano, had changed the way he saw the world. For once he had been humbled, not by wealth, not by power, but by the simple truth of talent and heart. That evening, the Grand Hotel returned to its normal rhythm. Guests continued with their parties, conversations, and laughter. But for the billionaire, nothing would be the same. The memory of her playing, the power in her quiet hands, and the courage to face the room despite mockery had left an imprint on him. He could not shake the image of her standing there, confident and unafraid, letting music speak louder than words ever could. And somewhere in the night, the young woman walked alone through the city streets, her worn shoes making soft sounds on the pavement. She did not know the impact she had made, but it did not matter. She had played her truth, shared her heart, and changed a room full of people in a way that could never be measured. She had turned mockery into magic, and for one brief shining moment, the world had truly listened. After the young woman walked away, the room still hummed with the echoes of her music. People could not stop talking about what they had just experienced. Conversations were low and hushed, full of awe and disbelief. Some of the guests replayed the melody in their minds, struggling to understand how such beauty could come from someone so unassuming. Even the orchestra musicians who had been playing earlier paused, shaking their heads in wonder. They had been trained for years, yet they had never heard anything like what she had played. The billionaire lingered near the piano, unable to move. He kept thinking about the sound, the way it rose and fell, the depth it carried. Every note seemed to tell a story, and the story felt painfully real. It was not just music. It was a reflection of life, of struggle and hope. He felt a strange mix of guilt and admiration. He had mocked her in front of everyone, assuming she would fail, and instead, she had revealed something he had never expected. For the first time, he realized that people often carried unseen stories that could not be judged by appearances. He walked slowly to the window, staring out at the city lights. The streets below were busy, full of cars, people hurrying to and from their destinations, and yet he felt isolated, almost trapped by what he had witnessed. The world around him continued, oblivious, but in the lobby, time had paused. He could not shake the memory of her playing, her quiet confidence, or the power of the music. It had touched him deeply, something money or influence could never reach. Meanwhile, the young woman moved through the streets, her steps measured, her mind calm. She did not feel triumphant or proud. She felt relief. Relief that she had played, that she had shared her music without fear or hesitation. Every note she had struck was a piece of her life, a chapter of her story, and now it had been heard. It did not matter who applauded or mocked. What mattered was that she had expressed herself fully and honestly. The next morning, the billionaire could not focus. His office, filled with expensive furniture and the latest technology, felt empty and meaningless. He tried to attend to his meetings, make decisions, and sign papers. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the piano, the young woman, and the music. He could not understand why he felt so shaken. He had faced business failures, betrayals, and challenges before, but nothing had stirred him like this moment. It was not a question of intellect or strategy. It was something deeper, something raw and human, determined to understand. He asked his assistant to find out if anyone knew who the woman was. Names, records, even old acquaintances were searched. There was little information at first, only whispers that she had played in small gatherings and on streets for years, unknown to most. Her life had been invisible to the world, yet her music had carried a voice that no wealth or status could silence. The billionaire found himself fascinated, wanting to know more about her past, her struggles, and the experiences that had shaped such talent. Back in her modest apartment, the young woman sat by a small window, the light of the early morning filtering in. She had a few sheets of music, worn and frayed, spread across a small table. She traced her fingers over the notes, remembering the story each one told. Each composition had been written in a moment of pain or joy, loss or hope. Her music was her diary, her way of surviving the world. And now, for the first time, she realized that her music could touch people beyond the streets, beyond her small circle of listeners. It could reach hearts, even those hardened by wealth and power. The billionaire, meanwhile, began to experience changes in his daily life. Meetings that once seemed routine now felt hollow. He started listening to music differently, noticing nuances, emotions, and expressions he had previously ignored. He found himself pausing during business calls to remember the melody that had haunted him since the night at the hotel. His staff noticed a subtle difference in him. He was quieter, more thoughtful, less certain of the rigid authority he usually displayed. He began to ask questions about people's lives, about their passions, about what mattered beyond money and influence. One evening, he returned to the hotel lobby where it had all happened. The piano sat in the same corner, silent and untouched. He placed his hands lightly on the keys, pressing a note. It was not music. It was only a sound. Yet it brought a flood of memory, the echo of her melody, the emotion she had shared. He closed his eyes, letting the sound carry him back to that moment, back to the weight of the room, the surprise of the guests, and the courage of the young woman. He realized that this music had done something no one else could. It had forced him to feel, to confront himself, to see beyond appearances and preconceptions. Word of the performance spread quietly. Social media caught fragments of the story, videos shared by guests, capturing the stunned expressions and applause. People speculated, debated, and admired. Some were inspired to play music themselves. Others reflected on how quickly they judged others. The young woman became a symbol, not of fame or wealth, but of resilience, courage, and the transformative power of art. Yet she remained grounded. She did not seek attention, nor did she ask for recognition. Her life continued quietly, marked by small routines, practice sessions, and simple joys. The world had noticed her once, but she understood that true change came from within, not from the applause or validation of others. Her music remained her voice, her sanctuary. In her way of navigating a world that often overlooked the quiet and the unseen, the billionaire reached out. Not with wealth, not with influence, but with curiosity and respect. He sought to understand her journey, the obstacles she had faced, and the strength that had allowed her to continue creating beauty despite hardship. They met quietly away from the crowd and the expectations. He listened, not as a businessman or a powerful figure, but as a human being, genuinely interested in another human being's story. The young woman spoke softly, sharing glimpses of her past, her struggles, and the moments that shaped her music. Her words were simple but powerful, filled with honesty and emotion. As he listened, the billionaire felt a shift within himself. The walls he had built around his heart, walls of pride, judgment, and indifference, began to crumble. He realized that his wealth and influence were meaningless if they could not be used to recognize, support, and uplift true talent and humanity. He had mocked her at the piano, expecting to feel superiority, but instead he had been humbled. The experience forced him to see the world differently, to value courage and authenticity over appearances and status. Days turned into weeks, but the impact of that evening remained. The young woman continued to play, sharing her music with those who would listen. Never seeking fame, never seeking reward. The billionaire made subtle changes in his life, supporting initiatives that nurtured talent, listening to stories he might have ignored before, and approaching people with a newfound empathy. Both of them had been changed by a single moment, a brief encounter that carried more weight than any grand gesture or plan. The story of the young woman at the piano became more than a tale of talent. It became a reminder of the power of courage, authenticity, and the human spirit. It showed that even in a world obsessed with wealth, status, and appearances, true art and true humanity could shine through. And it proved that sometimes the simplest actions, like playing a melody from the heart, could create ripples that changed lives in ways that no one could predict. The young woman's music continued to echo in the minds of those who heard it. Every note told a story, every melody carried a lesson. The billionaire remembered her every day, not with guilt, but with gratitude. Gratitude that someone had reminded him of what it meant to truly see, to truly feel, and to truly respect the hidden depths of another human being. And in that realization, both of their lives moved forward, quietly transformed by the power of a song played at the right time, in the right place, by the right hands. The days after the performance were filled with whispers and questions. Many guests at the hotel could not stop talking about the young woman at the piano. People were curious about her story. How could someone who looked so fragile play with such strength? How could someone from the streets hold an entire room of powerful people in awe? The billionaire himself could not stop thinking about her. He had asked people to find out who she was, but the answers were vague. A few people remembered seeing her play in small local concerts. Others said she used to perform in the streets, drawing small crowds of curious onlookers. No one knew her full story. The young woman, meanwhile, continued her quiet life. She practiced on old pianos wherever she could find them. She did not seek recognition, only music. Her apartment was small, filled with sheets of music, a few books, and memories of her past. The walls were bare, but the room had warmth. Each note she had played at the hotel carried pieces of her life, pieces that had been hidden from the world. And now, slowly, those pieces were beginning to surface. Her childhood had been filled with music. Her parents had recognized her talent early. Before the world saw her, she had been a prodigy, playing in small concerts and winning awards. Music had been her joy and her escape, but life was never easy. A tragedy struck when she was still young. Her parents were taken away by illness, leaving her alone. She was placed in a foster home, and though she survived, the world around her was harsh and unforgiving. Her talent was ignored, her voice unheard, and her life became a daily struggle. Despite the difficulties, she never gave up on music. It was the one thing that never abandoned her. She learned to play by heart, composing melodies that told stories no one could see. Each note was a reflection of her journey, joy, loss, hope, fear, courage. And as she grew older, she realized that music was not just a skill, it was her voice. It spoke when words could not. It was her companion, her confidant, and her shield. The billionaire, curious and restless, finally arranged to meet her. He wanted to understand the person behind the music, to see the world through her eyes. They met in a quiet cafe, away from the flash of cameras and the whispers of the crowd. She arrived with a calm demeanor, her eyes steady but alert. She did not seem surprised or intimidated by him. She had faced life's challenges and had learned to remain composed. He looked at her carefully. There was no pretense in her expression, no demand for attention or praise. She spoke softly, explaining her past without exaggeration. She told him about her parents, about the loss she had endured, and about how music had been the only constant in her life. Her story was simple, yet it carried a profound depth. Each word reflected resilience, courage, and a quiet strength that was rare in the world he knew. As she spoke, the billionaire began to understand the music in a new way. The melody he had heard at the hotel was not just a display of skill. It was a reflection of her life, a map of her emotions and experiences. Every rise and fall, every pause and accent in her playing, had a reason. It was as if the piano had been an extension of her soul. And each performance was a conversation with the world that had once ignored her. The young woman also shared stories of people who had hurt her, places that had rejected her, and moments when she had doubted herself. Yet she spoke without bitterness. Her tone carried reflection, not resentment. She had learned to transform pain into beauty, to use hardship as fuel for creation. The billionaire listened, realizing that her strength was not just in music, but in life itself. She had survived when many would have given up. She had created when the world had tried to silence her in the days following their meeting. He began to share her story with close associates, not to boast or claim credit, but to highlight a lesson he had learned. Appearances were often misleading, and true talent could be found in unexpected places. He encouraged people around him to look beyond surface judgments and to value courage and authenticity. Slowly, the young woman's life and music began to touch more people. Invitations to small concerts and gatherings arrived, not as charity, but as genuine appreciation. She accepted only when she felt ready, always maintaining her independence and dignity. The public became fascinated by her story. Articles and social media posts tried to capture her journey, but nothing could fully express it. People were drawn not just to her music, but to her spirit. They admired how she had endured, how she had remained true to herself, and how she had shared her voice despite years of struggle. Her story became a symbol of hope, showing that even in the face of adversity, courage and talent could shine. Meanwhile, the billionaire experienced changes in his own life. He began to question long-held assumptions, not just about people, but about himself. He realized that wealth and influence were only meaningful when used to support, uplift, and recognize the value in others. He started funding music programs for children, supporting local artists, and creating opportunities for those whose voices were often unheard. It was not for recognition, but as a personal commitment to the lessons he had learned from the young woman. The young woman's music began to evolve as well. Each performance reflected her experiences, her observations, and her interactions with the world. She composed new pieces, inspired by life and the people she encountered. Her music became a bridge between her past and the present, between the struggles she had endured and the opportunities that were now unfolding. Every note told a story, every melody carried a message of resilience and hope. In private, the billionaire often returned to the piano, trying to capture even a fragment of what he had heard. He could play simple notes, but they were hollow compared to her depth. Each attempt reminded him that talent and heart could never be bought or forced. He reflected on the humility and courage required to share one's gifts with the world. And he realized that he had much to learn, not just from her music, but from the example of her life. Their encounters continued, quietly and respectfully. He never sought to control her or her career, only to understand and appreciate. She, in turn, remained independent, always following her own path. Yet in their interactions, both discovered lessons that would shape their futures. The billionaire learned empathy, humility, and the importance of seeing beyond the surface. The young woman discovered that her music could reach further than she had imagined, and that her story could inspire others without losing its authenticity. Slowly, the young woman became more confident in sharing her music with the world. She performed in small venues, schools, and community centers. Each performance carried the same honesty, the same depth, the same emotional resonance that had first captivated the hotel audience. People listened, not as critics, but as witnesses to a life transformed by courage and perseverance. Her music became a voice for the unseen, the overlooked, and the underestimated. The billionaire remained a silent supporter, ensuring that she had opportunities without imposing expectations. He saw in her a reminder of what it meant to be human, to value talent and heart above all else. Her presence challenged him, inspired him, and humbled him. He often thought back to that night at the hotel, realizing that one moment of courage, one melody played with honesty, could change perspectives and touch lives in ways that power and wealth never could. The young woman's story spread slowly but surely. People began to recognize her not just for her music, but for her resilience, her authenticity, and her ability to transform struggle into art. Her journey became an example, a source of inspiration for those who faced difficulties and doubt. She showed that, even in the harshest conditions, talent, courage, and integrity could prevail, and through it all, she remained herself. She never sought fame or validation. She played because she had to, because music was her life, her voice, and her way of understanding the world. The billionaire, once a figure of judgment and mockery, became a student of her wisdom. Together, in different ways, they demonstrated that true change, real impact, and genuine respect could emerge from the simplest acts: listening, understanding, and valuing the humanity in another person. The billionaire sat alone in his office, staring at the city lights through the large glass windows. The skyscrapers and neon signs of the night seemed distant, almost meaningless. His mind was elsewhere, filled with the memory of the young woman at the piano. He remembered every detail: the worn clothes, the determination in her eyes, and the music that had filled the grand hotel lobby with such raw emotion. He thought about the way the room had fallen silent, the stunned faces of the guests, and the depth of feeling in every note she played. He realized that something profound had shifted inside him that night. In the following days, he began to notice himself acting differently. His interactions with his employees changed. He listened more, asked more questions, and began to pay attention to the small details in their lives. He realized he had spent years focused solely on business and wealth, ignoring the human side of the people around him. He felt a growing need to understand the world from a perspective he had long dismissed. The young woman's music had awakened something inside him, something he could not ignore. He found himself reflecting on his own past, on moments when he had been judged unfairly or dismissed, and he understood the impact of underestimating someone. He remembered opportunities he had been given and how much harder life could be for those without influence or money. He realized that his mocking at the piano was not just a small act. It represented a larger pattern in his life, an arrogance and impatience with people who did not fit his expectations. Guilt began to settle in, but it was accompanied by a desire to change, to learn, and to act differently. He decided to reach out to the young woman, not to offer pity or charity, but to express genuine respect and interest. Their meetings became frequent but quiet, away from public attention. They talked about music, life, and the experiences that had shaped her journey. She spoke about her challenges, her losses, and the moments of hope that had kept her going. She did not complain or seek sympathy. She simply shared her story honestly. The billionaire listened, absorbing every word, feeling the weight of her experiences and the strength it had taken to overcome them. Through these conversations, he began to understand that his power and wealth were meaningless without empathy and human connection. He realized that he had spent years valuing people for what they could offer him, rather than for who they truly were. The young woman's courage and authenticity forced him to confront the limitations of his worldview. He began to see that true influence came not from money or control, but from inspiring, supporting, and uplifting others. The billionaire also started exploring his own creative side. He had once been interested in music, painting, and writing, but his life had been consumed by business and ambition. Inspired by the young woman, he picked up a piano in his office and attempted to play. At first, it was awkward and clumsy, every note a reminder of how much he had lost touch with his own humanity. But he persisted, understanding that the effort itself was valuable. Each attempt reminded him that skill alone was not enough. Feeling, intention, and vulnerability were what truly mattered. He began to appreciate the courage it took for her to perform, knowing that she had done so without any guarantee of recognition or reward. As time passed, he started to integrate these lessons into his professional life. He funded music and arts programs for children who lacked access to education. He sponsored local artists, giving them opportunities to showcase their work without asking for anything in return. He encouraged his team to listen, to notice, and to value the human experiences behind every action. Slowly, he began to feel a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. A fulfillment not tied to wealth or status, but to meaningful connection and support. The young woman continued her journey, performing in small venues, schools, and community events. She shared her music freely, not seeking fame or reward, but simply giving voice to the emotions and stories that lived within her. Her performances were raw, authentic, and filled with a depth of feeling that left audiences moved. People began to understand that her life experiences, her struggles, and her resilience were inseparable from the beauty of her music. They saw not just talent, but courage, perseverance, and humanity. The billionaire observed her growth from a distance, always careful not to impose or control. He learned that true support meant giving space, listening, and providing opportunities without expectations. He realized that humility was not a weakness, but a strength. By acknowledging his own mistakes, by confronting his own arrogance, he had become more human, more compassionate, and more aware of the lives around him. One evening, he returned to the Grand Hotel lobby, the place where it had all begun. The piano sat quietly in its corner, untouched since that night. He approached it with care, pressing a key softly. The sound echoed through the room, simple and unremarkable on its own, but it carried the weight of memory. He thought about the young woman, her courage, and the impact she had had on him. He realized that this small moment had set in motion a transformation that no amount of money or power could achieve. It had reminded him of the importance of empathy, the value of listening, and the power of authenticity. The billionaire understood that change was ongoing. He knew he would continue to face challenges, doubts, and moments of arrogance. But he also knew that he had learned an essential truth: to see and appreciate the humanity in others, to recognize their talents and struggles, and to act with humility and respect. The young woman's music had done more than captivate a room. It had reshaped the way he lived, thought, and related to the world. In the weeks and months that followed, he became more attentive in his daily life. He noticed the small acts of kindness, the efforts of those around him, and the stories that often went untold. He made an effort to acknowledge, support, and celebrate people, not for what they could provide, but for who they were. This shift brought unexpected satisfaction and a sense of purpose he had never experienced before. The young woman's story continued to inspire others. Articles, posts, and conversations spread about the street musician whose courage and talent had transformed a billionaire. People admired her resilience, her authenticity, and the power of her music. Yet she remained grounded, focused on her craft and her journey, never letting recognition alter her path. She understood that her music was not about fame, but about connection, expression, and the ability to touch hearts. The billionaire's transformation was equally profound. He no longer saw success solely in terms of wealth and achievement. He measured it in empathy, understanding, and the ability to make a positive impact. His life had shifted from one of self-interest to one of awareness and responsibility. He had learned that true greatness lay not in power or influence, but in the ability to recognize and nurture the humanity in others. Together, though they remained separate in their daily lives, they shared a silent bond. One had changed the other through music, courage, and authenticity. The young woman had revealed the depth of human potential through her art, and the billionaire had learned to embrace humility, empathy, and purpose. Their encounter was a reminder that true transformation often comes from unexpected moments, from acts of bravery, and from the courage to be authentic, no matter the circumstances. And so, the young woman continued to play, her melodies carrying stories of hope, loss, courage, and resilience. The billionaire continued to listen, learn, and act with newfound understanding. Their lives, though different, were intertwined by a single night, a single performance, and the enduring power of music to change hearts, minds, and lives forever. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks slowly turned into months. But the memory of the young woman at the piano never left the billionaire. Every time he tried to focus on business or on matters of wealth and power, her music crept into his thoughts. It was not just a melody he remembered, but the courage, the strength, and the authenticity behind every note. He realized that he had been given a lesson that could not be measured in money or success. It was a lesson in humanity. Meanwhile, the young woman continued her journey quietly. She did not seek fame or attention. She played in community centers, small theaters, and sometimes even on street corners. But now, wherever she went, people listened differently. Some had heard about her performance at the Grand Hotel, and some came out of curiosity. Yet even when no one watched, she played with the same heart, the same depth, and the same honesty. Her music was no longer just a personal refuge. It had become a way to touch the lives of others, to bring hope, comfort, and understanding. The billionaire, true to his newfound perspective, began supporting her journey, not with grand gestures or attempts to control, but with quiet assistance. He helped provide opportunities for her to perform in safe, respectful spaces. He introduced her to people who could assist her career not out of obligation, but as recognition of her talent and dedication. Yet he always allowed her to remain independent, ensuring that she maintained her voice and her choices. He knew that true respect meant giving space and freedom, not trying to own or shape someone's life. One day, she was invited to perform at a charity event that gathered people from all walks of life. The event was small and intimate, but filled with individuals who could influence change in meaningful ways. When she walked onto the stage, her presence was calm and confident. The audience settled into quiet anticipation, sensing that something special was about to happen. As her fingers touched the keys, the room was filled with a sound that was both powerful and gentle, rich with emotion and history. Each note carried her story, her struggles, her triumphs, and her hope. Everyone listened, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. The billionaire sat in the front row, watching quietly, his hands folded in his lap. He had been in countless rooms of wealth and power, yet none had moved him like this one. He observed the audience, noting how the music reached every corner, touching people in ways that money or influence could never achieve. He felt a sense of peace and fulfillment he had never experienced. He realized that witnessing her music, supporting her journey, and learning from her courage had transformed him completely. After the performance, as the audience erupted into applause, she stood gracefully, acknowledging them without exaggeration. She did not seek attention, and yet everyone knew the depth of her talent. The applause was genuine, not just for skill, but for the story she carried, the strength she had shown, and the humanity she had shared. People were inspired, moved, and reminded of the power of authenticity and courage. The young woman's music had become more than performance. It had become a bridge connecting people through shared emotion and understanding. The billionaire approached her quietly after the event. He did not speak immediately. He simply watched her for a moment, taking in the way she carried herself, the calm confidence in her eyes, and the humility that had always been a part of her nature. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and genuine. He thanked her, not for entertainment or inspiration, for teaching him something that no book, business deal, or lecture could ever teach. He admitted his past mistakes, the arrogance he had displayed, and how her courage had forced him to see the world differently. It was a moment of honesty, humility, and human connection. She listened quietly, nodding slightly. She did not offer praise or reassurance, for she understood that his realization was his own. She had only shared her music and her story, and the effect it had on him was a reflection of his willingness to see, hear, and learn. Their exchange was simple, yet profound, demonstrating that true change often comes quietly. Through shared experiences and authentic interactions, over time, the young woman's reputation continued to grow. She was invited to perform in more venues, each time touching hearts and inspiring audiences. People admired not just her talent, but her resilience, authenticity, and ability to transform pain into beauty. Her story became an example for those who struggled, showing that courage, perseverance, and honesty could overcome even the harshest circumstances. She proved that recognition was not the goal, but a byproduct of living fully, authentically, and with purpose. The billionaire, transformed by the experience, continued to support her and others like her. He became a quiet advocate for talent and humanity, using his resources to uplift, nurture, and provide opportunities for those whose voices might otherwise be ignored. He recognized that influence was not about control or recognition, but about creating space for others to shine and guiding them without imposing. His life, once defined by wealth and power, was now measured by impact, empathy, and understanding. Together, though their paths were separate, they shared an unspoken bond. One had given the other a lesson in humility, courage, and the human spirit. The young woman had shared her voice through music, and the billionaire had learned to listen, to value, and to act with compassion. Their connection, though quiet and indirect, had lasting effects on both their lives and on the lives of those they touched. The ripple of that single night at the piano continued, spreading through communities, inspiring individuals, and reminding everyone that talent, authenticity, and courage could change lives in ways that nothing else could.